is still one of the very important research on that. So I'll give now the floor to Roumen Avramov, please, and we'll follow up the 20 minutes, more or less, speeches.
Thank you very much. And let me start by observing that in my country, you will not come across an official academic or commemorative event titled Bulgaria and the Holocaust or the Final Solution in Bulgaria, as it is the case of this conference and of the panel so rightly dedicated to Frederick Chare. This presentation, based on archival evidence, aims at reconciling them by putting the facts in the perspective of a coherent, although bifurcating, truncated trajectory. The claim is that the anti-Semitic policies in Bulgaria proper and in the so-called New Lands, occupied in April 1941, were faithfully assumed by the state and had common roots and patterns. Their foundation led down from January 1941 to February 1942, initially considered the civic and economic exclusion of the Jews with myriad of regulations whose three pillars were the law for the protection of the nation, the one-time wealth taxation, and the special chapter of the law against speculation. But whereas enacted before the Wannsee Conference, and partly even before Bulgaria joined the Axis, those instruments set precedents and principles allowing for the hardening of the policies. Starting from May 1942, the Bulgarian government embraced objectives and measures compatible with or leading to the final solution. They affected all the dimensions of the state anti-Semitism on the whole territory under Bulgarian control. Legal provisions codified the citizenships in the new lands, unconstitutionally entrusted the government with the solution of the Jewish question, and devised the meticulous ordinance from August 29. A new institutional setting established the Commissariat for Jewish Affairs, financed by the Jewish communities and directed by the virulent anti-Semite and Germanophile Alexander Belev. Wearing the yellow badge became mandatory, and the economic suffocation of the Jews was completed by further squeeze of their activities and exhaustive Bulgarization of their capitals through auctions or nationalizations. On those grounds, in July-October, Belev shaped out a German-style strategic master plan about the radical solution of the Jewish question. The idea was to cut the economic bonds of the Jews with the country, which, however, in 4 to 5 years would compel the state to sustain them. As this was impossible, the only way out was allegedly their total deportation. Voluntary immigration, partial or domestic displacements were eliminated as unrealistic options. The initial view on the time horizon was that getting rid of the Jews would be attainable only after the war or in the frame of a pan-European scheme, but also that potential cooperation with Germany could accelerate the plan. Most importantly, the forthcoming deportations were reviewed publicly with the publication of the ordinance from August 29 in the State Gazette. Their preparation was assigned to the Jewish communities. This was the context of the contacts with the Reich. Concerning the Jews, Bulgaria, as a German ally, had some room for maneuver inexistent in the countries invaded by the Nazis. Indeed, those contacts were in no way an ultimatum, as Zdravka pointed out, but through diplomatic negotiations where Germany carefully avoided to harm politically the Bulgarian counterpart. In turn, like in 1940, the authorities followed the general rule to adopt and diligently implement anti-Semitic policies which anticipate the German wishes. By so doing, in a Faustian bargain, they tried to achieve specific political goals and, above all, to accomplish the Bulgarian irredentist agenda. The first talks in July had a limited scope. Bulgaria conceded that its several hundred Jewish subjects living in Germany, and the protectorate can be deported to the east, as Shlomo Sherotiel told us before. But when, in September, Ribbentrop gave instructions for a general speeding up of the deportations in Europe, including from Bulgaria, he knocked on an open door. The Bulgarian government proudly answered that it has had alone the idea to expel the Jews, referring to the August announcement, and expressed satisfaction that its efforts to solve comprehensively the Jewish question have drawn the attention of the German government. The assistance offered by Germany was exactly what the Bulgarian authorities were looking for, coming at the perfect timing. Bulgaria was ready to pay for the service because, as it actually happened, the operation was to be financed by the Jews themselves, and the proceeds of their plundering would exceed the costs. In the course of the negotiation, October-November, the Bulgarian side conceived a three-stage deportation schedule. To start with the new lands, then to proceed with Sofia and Plovdiv, finally with the rest of Bulgaria, of all to Bulgaria. The advanced argument for the delay was the pretended need for cheap labor force, but Belev envisaged to transform the existing labor groups into permanent detention camps until the definitive deportation. The final timeline was elaborated after the arrival in January 1943 of Theodor Dannecker. At that time, Gabrovsky seemed decided to deal only with the new lands, but the variant for full or partial deportation from the Old Kingdom was still on the table. At the end, the infamous Dannecker-Belev agreement from February 22 included 8,000 unreliable, that is better off, leaders of communist Jews from Bulgaria proper, who were to be stripped from their citizenship according to the law voted in December 1940. The domestic arrangements were packed into 7 confidential government decrees adopted on March 2, which did not discriminate between the Jews in the new lands and in Bulgaria proper. Only at this moment the trajectory of the master plan bifurcated. The original blueprint and the ultimate purpose were fully achieved in the occupied lands, while they aborted in the Old Kingdom. What occurred in occupied Yugoslavia and Greece was an exemplary case of collaboration during the Holocaust. It combined exclusive and remarkably efficient involvement of the Bulgarian institutions, adequate financing, a large-scale logistic support, including blockades and roundups, transportation to transit camps and to departure points, transfer to the Germans for the terminal journey to Treblinka, preliminary liquidation of the Jewish businesses, and ex post, actually post-mortem liquidation of the valuables and personal belongings, nationalization of the homes and Jewish communal property. In Old Bulgaria, the salvation of the rescue was, strictly speaking, the sudden halt, then just postponement on March 10 of the deportation of the 8,000 selected Bulgarian Jews. But the stop did not eliminate the little threats, and anxieties about future deportations persisted. The German legation in Bulgaria, the embassy in Bulgaria, downplayed the importance of the event. The bilateral relations were not affected. The not ideological but eminently economic variety of Bulgarian anti-Semitism was accepted as a fact of life. Filov reiterated his commitment that the deportation of all the Jews would be completed. Bulgaria was even prized as a poster child, tackling much better the Jewish question than Italy and Hungary. The plan derailed but was not abandoned. It was partly reactivated in May when the Jews were expelled from Sofia and divested according to procedures applied in the new lands. Belev and his team stayed until the death of Boris, the King Boris. The profile of the new commissioner, the prosecutor Stomaniakov, symbolized that anti-Semitism was put on an equal footing with anti-communism. Dannekir's mission was not terminated until the autumn, and the commissariat continued its routine operations and the ratio system remained in place. Ultimately, the plan faded out due to domestic and international developments and also to the institutional dislocation of the commissariat after the January 44 bombings of Sofia. The bifurcation of the real-life events gave its imprint to the cleavage of the post-war memories and interpretations. The dichotomic fate of the Jews under Bulgarian rule was embedded, as brilliantly outlined in the recent book by Nadezh Vagaru, into two secluded and asymmetrical narratives about the salvation and the dark side, that is the large-scale anti-Semitic policies put in place and the deportations from the new lands. The dissociation of those narratives tend to erase the Bulgarian trace in the Holocaust by focusing exclusively on the glorifying story of the survival, while marginalizing, self-absolving, and externalizing the responsibility for the deportations. Regarding the salvation, memory wars rage continuously over the appropriation of its moral capital and its use for legitimation and of political regimes. In reality, the event per se did not reflect a mass movement as often presented, but was the merit of few individuals of their resolute, timely, and successful maneuvering of preserved Bulgarian Jewish networks. The towering figures, Peshev, Mushanov, Steinov, and some members of the Orthodox Church, were those who gave the decisive impulse by putting the king in an uncomfortable political situation. Boris decided to avoid the imminent risk and to minimize the reputational impact, but his was a defensive, not at all a proactive role in those events. In what concerns the surrounding general public, it consisted at large of not a few empathic people, of lots of profiteers, and mostly of indifferent bystanders. The direct negation of the Bulgarian responsibility The direct negation of the Bulgarian responsibility for the deportations is based on three wrong premises commented by Zdravka this morning. Here, some overlapping is unavoidable. We did not coordinate our presentations. But let me just formulate those statements. The first false premise. Only Germany had sovereignty over the new lands, and Zdravka demonstrated in legal terms that Bulgaria de facto imposed an anticipatory annexation. Annexation was the term used even in the Bulgarian parliament by Petko Steinov in the debates in 1943. But let me provide some additional evidence. The entire legislation, as it was already mentioned, including the anti-Semitic, was implemented. The granting of Bulgarian citizenship unlawful in occupied lands was initiated as an alignment to the territorial sovereignty. This is the formulation in the Bulgarian official documents. Only the Greek and Yugoslav Jews were not allowed to opt for it in reference to the law for the protection of the nation, despite their insistent requests. All the Bulgarian state attributes and symbolic were introduced, and the propaganda proclaimed the unification under the rule of the King Unifier. Huge public resources were invested, and Bulgaria assumed pro rata the corresponding share of the Yugoslav debt and the Yugoslav and the Greek debt to Germany. Those lands were included as new units or annexed to the Sofia district in the kingdom's administrative, ecclesiastical, and educational structures. Tellingly, the commissariat reported that the Jews are sent outside the boundaries of the country that is of Bulgaria. And the statistical yearbook for 1942 incorporated the territories and their inhabitants to the kingdom, so that the Bulgarian Jewish population rose from 48 to roughly 61,000 people. The Reich accepted and recognized in diplomatic terms this status quo because its main concern there was military. Statement 2, despite its desire, the Bulgarian government was not in a position to save the Jews in the new territories. The underlying assumption is that the decision to deport was the diktat of the Reich. As a matter of fact, from the very beginning, the Bulgarian government excluded any protection of the Jews from the new lands. Counterfactual exercises are risky. I agree with Zdravka in this point. However, without being a proof, precedents outline a panoply of alternative decisions. Italy did not deport the Jews from occupied Greece and Albania. Bulgaria itself had a selective approach. It left Jews from neutral and allied countries or Jewish medical personnel in Macedonia. The government was perfectly aware of hesitations in the attitudes to deportation across Europe, even in Romania. Generally speaking, a reluctance to deport did not induce breakdowns of strategic alliances with the Reich. The hypothesis that this could have been considered a casus belli and provoke a German invasion of Bulgaria is exaggerated. Bulgaria was not unique. Other German allies too, like Italy and Hungary, until their occupation, Finland or Romania in the boundaries of its old kingdom did not deport their Jewish citizens. And statement 3, the fate of the deported Jews was unclear. But the Bulgarian government ignored the explicit warnings. It is well known that Philo's diary records the declaration by the Swiss minister in Sofia that deportation meant death. The famous Peshev's letter warns about possible accusations for mass murdering. In Parliament, Mushanov, Steinov outspokenly pointed out the unlawful character of the deportations. And the Allies had already publicly condemned the ongoing extermination of the Jews in Europe in December 1942. Bulgarian society today is neither prepared nor willing to acknowledge a link with the Holocaust. The great majority of the public opinion, the academic community, except for a few historians, all represented in this conference, and the political establishment refused to associate Bulgaria with the final solution. Until recently, the most notorious official rejection of responsibility was the parliamentary declaration from March 2013, quoted by Zdravka. But this year's commemoration of the 80th anniversary went well beyond. The official position, coordinated by the President's office, coined the absurd claim that the salvation should be attributed to the state, supposed to having premeditated long in advance and carried out a grand plan to save the Bulgarian Jews. Mutism was absurd concerning the deportations, and the President paid a provocative tribute to the King, thus implicating the celebration in his policy, in his policies vis-à-vis Northern Macedonia. By highlighting exclusively the salvation and the benevolent acts, the dominant public discourse plays down the harsh anti-Semitic historic reality and eclipses the deliberate cooperation in the Holocaust. As a whole, this position constitutes open state negationism and denialism. Oddly enough, Bulgaria is the working definition of Holocaust denial and distortion of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, to which it is full member since 2018. In a broader perspective, the widespread incomplete narrative acquires the status of a foundational myth with nationalistic connotations. By building the uncritical image of an intrinsically immaculate and innocent Bulgarian state of people, it becomes an ingredient of the mounting jingoistic rhetoric. Nowadays, Bulgaria seems far away from a sincere apology. A wording similar to the 1995 Jacques Chirac's solemn declaration on behalf of the French Republic would be particularly appropriate. Such act would not deny, but only dignify, the remarkable episode which has entered the national collective memory as the salvation of the Bulgarian Jews.
Thank you. We are very well.